know, with Air Farce, I've played over 3,000 characters. You know, I've played everything from, you know, a hooker to a prime minister, and sometimes in the same costume.
Best known for her work in radio and television with the Royal Canadian Air Farce, Luba Goy has received a Governor-General's Performing Arts Award, a Juno. She's on Canada's Walk of Fame. She has 2 honorary doctorates and has won 15 Actra awards. We met up with her after the opening run of her one-woman play, Luba, Simply Luba, which is based on her life.
Here we are.
So, Luba, what were you like as a kid? Were you an introverted kid, or were you an extroverted kid?
Is this a trick question?
Only if you want it to be.
I don't think too many people have asked me that. I was a little bit of both. I was extroverted on stage, but quite introverted off stage.
Which is not uncommon, right?
I don't know.
A lot of performers are like that, I've found, at least in talking to them.
And I became more extroverted as I learned various tricks, like in grade 7 when I learned that I could talk like a duck. And then Dee Dee...
always a handy talent to have.
Yes, my homeroom teacher, you know, was never very impressed, and she'd say, you know, Luba, did you finish your assignment? And I go, she goes, young lady, you're not going to get anywhere with that, with that attitude. Well, boy, was she wrong. Because I knew I could work at any major international airport when I grew up, doing the announcements.
That's right, or any bus depot.
Attention passengers, this is the final boarding call for flight number now departing from grade 54.
So at the very early part of your life, you were with your parents in Belgium.
I was.
Do you have recollections of that? Did that leave an impression on you as a young kid?
Indeed, I had a very, very interesting life in Belgium. My parents were displaced people. They were taken out of Ukraine, where they were born, and they were in 2 different parts of Ukraine. Now, my parents were 2 different religions, like in Ireland, the Irish and the Protestants, the Catholics and the Protestants, except in Ukraine, it's the Orthodox and the Catholics who hate each other. Well, they hated each other in those days. They still do, but they pretend they don't. And so my father was a rabid Ukrainian Greek Catholic. Mama was Ukrainian Greek Orthodox. So this was a very mixed marriage. It never would have happened in Ukraine that they would have gotten married. Yeah. But the Germans took thousands of Ukrainians out. They went to Ukraine and other countries to take them to forced labor camps so that they could have workforce during the war. And my parents met in one of those labor camps, and they had the run of the place. They just didn't have papers to leave. It's not like the other camps where people were being exterminated. This is it's strictly like, it wasn't a camp, it was a town, a coal mining town.
Right.
And my parents, they lived in, they displaced their own people to allow these workers to come in.
Yeah.
And my mother was a servant to this very wealthy family. And it was an interesting experience for her as well. They had to learn German. My father worked with the coal mines. And my mother was a servant, and she was pregnant with me, and this is a little story, but she was coming to the house, and they weren't fed very well,
not surprisingly.
No. And they were fed, but not that great, and when you're pregnant, you need, vitamins and iron and greens, and so she said, like, when the German woman, she would throw away the onion greens, my mother would eat these. They were like in the garbage kind of thing outside in the, roughage. But she took 2 apples that were on the ground. There was all these apples, and I was born in November, so this must have been, I don't know when, but the apples were on the ground. They were kind of a little bit rotting. But she took 2 apples and she kind of put them behind a bush. She was going to take them home after. And she was working, and the master came in, and he was, I don't know if he was an SS officer, but he was like, one of the officers he had the 2 apples, and he just put them on the table in front of my mother and looked at her and didn't say a word. But you do not steal from me, even if the apples are rotting on the ground. Yeah. Can you imagine?
Incredible.
Yeah, that was my mother's story.
Wow.
But then they went to Belgium, where I grew up. Not very well. I only made it to 5 feet, but but you relax. You know, if you want to laugh, Ken, just let it out because it will find another way of exiting. Trust me, you know, especially if you've had the pierogies for lunch. Now, in Belgium, my father had a terrible accident on the slag heaps of Belgium, where he worked in a coal mine. He hated it.
Yeah.
In fact, he was trapped for 2 days with these 3 Ukrainian men and a Belgian. They were trapped in some little area, and the Belgian did not make it. And the 3 Ukrainian men, plus my father, made it out. They were pulled out.
Yeah.
He always had a little sort of scar right here, and it was like the coal had gotten in, and so he had a little line, and I go, Tato. Tato is Ukrainian for daddy. You know, tell me about it. And he goes, oh, I was trapped in the mine for 48 hours, and it was dark and terrible. And when they pulled him out, he got down on his knees and said, I will never go down to the coal mines again, because you know, he was not a miner. My father was an artist. He was a poet, a writer. He played mandolin every day of his life. He was a musical, and he was a Charlie Chaplin of the Ukrainian labor camp, and it was very, very funny. He used to do stand-up.
Yeah.
Could write a heck out of could write the heck out of a joke. Listen to this. Селепко поїхав до Парижу, сидить в кафе. Опто каже, qu'est-ce que vous voulez, monsieur? Принеси мені каву. О, pardonnez-moi. Ні, тут пердонів нема. Oh, pardon. See, pardon and perdun. Perdun means to fart. Pardon means pardon. He goes, pardonnez-moi. He goes, oh no, there's no farters here, because see, the character he would play was this kind of this real country bumpkin. It was his favorite character.
Yeah.
My father had this accident on the slag heaps, and so he couldn't work in the coal mines anyway of Belgium. So my mother saw this ad that they were looking for servants in this chateau. And I even have a postcard with the address of the chateau. And it was a gentleman farmer who happened to be Jewish. He was a Belgian Jew who had this 30-room chateau. And we lived on the servants' quarters. We had a room in the servants' quarters on the 3rd floor. And there was about 12 servants, chauffeur. My mother was like, it was like upstairs, downstairs. I lived in this, I thought I was a princess. I saw a movie once with this white staircase and this beautiful marble, handrail that they used to have in movies, like this 1930s film. And I went, I grew up in a place like that. I always wanted to slide down this, because it sort of went up and curved around like this, but it was about this wide. And at the bottom there was this big marble thing, and I always wanted to slide down the banister. Mom said, no, you'll hurt yourself. You'll kill yourself at the bottom. But the madame, it was very difficult. She had 2 sons that were in boarding school, and my mother was the downstairs cook. So she learned to make, my mother's a beautiful, wonderful cook, a wonderful baker. She used to cook and then put on a uniform, and all the food would go on this lazy, like what do you call it, elevator, like
a dumbwaiter.
Like a dumbwaiter, dumbwaiter, with all these silver things. And she'd be upstairs serving in the dining room, and I always wanted to get on the way, on this little elevator and go up and see what was going on. But so that was my life.
Wow.
I used to have to curtsy to the madame every morning as inspection happened. All the servants had to be inspected to make sure they were, proper. My father and another Ukrainian man, a couple, used to milk the cows. There was about 15 cows. They used to have these milking machines, hook them up, milk the cows. The milk would go to the factory, because he was a chocolate factory owner. So even to this day, I don't really like chocolate that much. I think I got chocolated out. No, honestly, people go, oh, chocolate cake. I go, just make it vanilla, because... but I thought I was a princess.
No
I
kidding.
lived in this incredible place with art and sculptures and beautiful rooms and chandeliers and heavy velvet curtains and polished floors. And we were displaced people.
Yeah.
We had nothing, but I had everything. And then I started kindergarten. Just before I came to Canada, I started kindergarten with the nuns. So of course I always wanted to be a nun. Hello. And until Sister Teresa reminded me that at some point when I was about 10, Ukrainian nun said, you know, Luba, you can't have a beehive hairdo and a crinoline under the habit. You know, so I said, okay, well, maybe I'll be an actress pretending to be a nun, you know.
So you get to Ottawa, and
I do.
You
in the 50s.
You had some.
Did I say that? No, I didn't. No.
And I didn't ask either. I didn't open that door.
Oh no, you don't. Like this though.
But you had some, as a lot of people do, you had some inspiration from some teachers that you had, and
Indeed.
one in particular.
Yes, Miss Barbara Blackstone, and she'll be 93 next month. This June is July, and this is 2012.
Right.
And she will be 93. I did a play called Luba Simply Luba, and I brought her to Toronto because I play her, and she'd be like, you'd walk into her classes, York Street's public school, grades 7 and 8. She also had a choir. She was an amazing person. 1934, she spent 10 years at the Conservatory in Toronto, and she had dark hair, and it was like a braided, like Yulia Tymoshenko, but she was she had a presence to her with these big glasses. And when I phone her, she picks up the phone, Barbara Blackstone. And I go, Miss Blackstone, it's Luba. Oh, for goodness sake, Luba, call me Barbara. No can do, Miss Blackstone.
No,
but you would walk into her class, Ken, and she would have Mozart or Beethoven on a record player, right? And you'd walk in, it was like da-da-da-da, or Mozart, or a Requiem. Now, she called me in one day, it was grade 7, and she says, Luba, you know, I'd like to talk to you. And I'm like, she goes, no, it's not a detention. I want you to try it for the public speaking contest. And I just had a meltdown. But what am I going to talk about? I mean, it's in English. What am I gonna, and she goes, I'm sure you'll find something to talk about. Goodness knows you have plenty to talk about in class. So I said, but you know, she goes, talk what's important to you. What is important to you? And I said, well, I'm going to become a Canadian citizen. I'm very proud of that. And I could talk about how I came to Canada on this big boat with my mother and father, you know, from the Port Le Havre, and I went across the ocean, and then we went to Ellis Island, you know, to the United States, and I saw the Statue of Liberty, and my mother said, no, this is not our country, we can't get off the boat. And then we sailed up the coast to Halifax, and I saw all these rocks, and I said, where's the lady with the lamp? And she said, this is our country, this is Canada. And then we took a train to Ottawa, and I said, and then I could say, and how proud I was going to be that I was going to become a Canadian citizen. And she said, well, there you are. You just wrote your speech, you know. Make it 5 minutes and no longer, no shorter.
I got to show you something. I'm going to open this up. Now, you've already seen this because I sent this picture to you, but this is you.
Oh, who's a pretty girl?
Yeah. Now, that's the character you were. This is a play called Visions of an Unseemly Youth.
Yes, written by John Palmer. He wrote the play for me and my husband-to-be.
And your character in the playbill just says goddess.
Well, typecast as always, you know. Yeah, I'd be the goddess, you know. I was the goddess there.
But you did a lot of theater in Ottawa. That's when you really started to get into it. You played.
Where's that other picture
Café
with the four heads?
Here,
That's good.
If I can find
good.
that
This
one
is
too,
really
if you'd
good
like
one.
to see it. There's.
So this was my husband later.
Right here.
Ed Hanna, Edward Kenneth Hanna. We had a child together, a love child. We were married at the time, for many years, but he was still a love child. Jean Sabina and John, I can't remember his last name, but yes, there I am. Yeah. Who's a pretty girl?
Now, you did a lot of plays. This was at Café Le Hibou, the coffee house that was here in Ottawa. But you also did stuff at the Ottawa Little Theatre. You did a lot of. You did Sock and Buskin at Carleton University, where a lot of people started. And I did
Mile 10 Summer Theatre. That was outside Elmer, and we rented this abandoned church, actually Elizabeth Dixon, and she had a family that was very much into the newspapers and whatnot. She had a sister who was quite beautiful. And anyway, we started this Mile 10 Summer Theatre because it was 10 miles outside Ottawa. And then, you know, people like Saul Rubinek and Bill Cameron, actually, and John Palmer would direct things. But we had such a lot of fun because it was summer stock.
Yeah.
So we did this schlocky, silly plays. We had a terribly good time. And that particular little now, talk about training, Ken. Check this out. It's a church. So we're like on the altar, like there's a stage, but it's the altar. And there's no backstage at all. We had like to be squeezed in. So half the time, there was two big windows on the side, church windows with ladders. So you go, I'm leaving, you slam the door, okay? Then you go down the window, out the window, down, run around the church if you had to enter stage left or stage right. Oh yeah.
Okay.
And if it was
the glamour of theater.
and if it was pissing down rain, can I say pissing down?
Yes,
okay.
sir.
So if it was pouring rain, you have your umbrella, then you run around so you're not too wet. And there was an outhouse. But that was like summer stock. And, you were doing a play at night and then rehearsing in the daytime. But not me, because I could never pass anything at Glebe Collegiate. So here I'm grade 11. I'm taking a film course because I want to be with Sauk and Buskin Carleton University.
Yeah.
They go, well, you have to take a course. You have to be a student to be in the Sauk and Buskin. So I said, fine, come in. Someone's knocking. Oh my God, it's the Prime Minister trying to get lunch. It's Joseph P. Clark. Yes, back in the saddle again. Yes, Joseph P. Clark, Canada's most popular Prime Minister for 9 whole months. I wasn't long enough to screw up like the rest of them. Margaret Atwood is here, though, of course. I'm terrible. I just want to say I'm terribly excited. So excited to be here. This is the most fascinating interview I've ever done.
When did you realize that you were good at impressions? Do you remember when that happened? I mean, up to now we were just talking about the straight acting, but somewhere in there you must have realized I have a capacity to do this.
That's a good question. My father was a mimic. He could do anything. He would make people laugh and cry. He really was, the Charlie Chaplin of theater, and he was so funny. He always played these crazy characters, and everything was always, he would act out everything at our house. I loved puppetry, and so Bobby Dermer and I, there's an actor called Bobby Dermer, he and I at Le Hibou Coffee House on Sussex Drive, where a lot of my creativity flourished and blossomed. We did Noreen Young's puppets. So we would do children's theater in the morning. Saturday morning we'd go and we have a little stage. We would do Little Red Riding Hood and all kinds of other children's things. And I just discovered I'm just.
Yeah, it just came out.
I think I don't know. Everybody can do it. Anybody can do this.
I'm not so sure about that.
Oh, sure.
I think after a while you start to think that everybody can,
well,
but I'm not sure that's...
Whenever I see a child, I bring out the puppets in them, the clown in them.
Right.
And I think that's what it starts with. You discover your clown, and the clown can do anything, you see, because you hide behind the clown.
Yeah.
When I did this play, Luba Simply Luba, and there is my brochure. Maybe my brochure it can be brought. But I had 3 characters to focus on: me, myself, and I, because it was the story of my life.
Right.
And that was really difficult to be to play yourself as a child, to play yourself as an adult, to play yourself as an 18-year-old.
Because you're not hiding behind a character anymore, are you?
No. Well, I had to find who I was on stage, and for 90 minutes, 25 scene changes with a bandurist in the background. The bandura is a 67-string instrument. Mm-hmm. It's the soul of Ukraine. It's like a member of the lute family. It's a big thing. And the bandurist had this huge basso profundo voice. He was behind these scrims. So in 90 minutes, we had 25 lighting and music changes. And I just talked. I never changed my costume. I would just put things on. And finding myself and talking about myself is really challenging.
Well, I'm sure.
Challenging.
Yeah.
Because, with Air Farce, I've played over 3,000 characters. I've played everything from, a hooker to a prime minister, and sometimes in the same costume. Remember Kim Campbell? I gave that party the best 4 months of my life. Kimmy Campbell. She's back now. Then I went to L.A. to become, the LAPD, the Los Angeles party doll. Yes. So, I mean, I've done everybody, Sandy Ronaldo, the Caring One, all these people would come on our shows, and Pam Wallen, who's now a senator.
Yeah, go figure.
I was waiting, I was hoping that maybe, because Jack Layton was on Air Farce quite a few times, and if Jack becomes Prime Minister,
you're in.
But he didn't believe in the Senate. But I would have convinced.
Well,
I thought if Mike Duffy and Pam Wallen could become senators, hello.
Or Frank Mahalo.
Yeah, really.
There you go.
Indeed, yes.
All right, now we only got a couple minutes left.
Okay, a couple of minutes.
And we haven't, and I intentionally haven't asked you about Air Farce specifically because people know that part of your life.
Oh, do they now?
But what I do want to ask you though about it is the transition, and whether it was a comfortable one, from doing it on radio, where it was hugely successful, to doing it on TV, where it kind of had a false start at the beginning and then caught on later on.
Did it now? False start?
Well, because it did.
Are you talking about the very first 12 half-hour episodes?
You did a couple of specials, right, around 1980 or so?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then Mulrooney, the government fell or whatever, and we lost our TV show. It was really interesting. We didn't think, because none of those guys were performers. Like, Dave hated television, so he didn't really. We were the Jest Society initially. After Pierre Trudeau's, we will have a Just Society, and then Dave Broadfoot was in Toronto. We were in Toronto doing the Jest Society. Dave Broadfoot was doing his own stand-up stuff, and so John Morgan decided, like, why don't we go on radio and do a half-hour show on political satire, which nobody was really doing in those days.
Yeah.
And Dave Broadfoot was our big star because everybody knew Dave. Sergeant Renfrew of the RCMP,
right.
and Big Bobby Clobber and the member for
Kicking
Horse Pass.
Yes,
so he and Martin Braunstein were partners who used to write for the David Frost Show in England, but that's another story. Then they went to Montreal from England, and then they went to CBC, and they proposed this radio show in front of live audiences, because it's the only way to do. Because we tried it in studio, it just never worked. Comedy just does not work for us.
You need a response from
you
an
have
audience,
to have
right?
that,
Yeah.
So they were on their way actually to register the name of our show, and Roger Rabbit was driving, and they came to a stop sign, and on the news was former Prime Minister John Diefenbaker on a rampage. Oh, they're taking the Royal Canadian out of everything. They're taking the Royal Canadian. Royal instant pudding is going to be instant pudding. So John Morgan turns, and this is what they were going to call our show, The Beaver Follies.
Dear God.
Yes.
Jeez.
The Beaver Follies, because John and Martin thought this. It was great. We hated. But it was John's baby, so it was going to be called the Beaver Follies.
Wow.
And on the way to register the name, John says to Roger, hey, we could be the Royal Canadian Air Farce. Farce on the air, because radio. And that's how the name was born. But before, if we'd been the Beaver Follies, we would have lasted.
Thank God for John Diefenbaker.
I know.
Who would have thought it?
Can you imagine? That's a true story. It's in the book. But the Beaver Follies. I mean,
wow.
But anyway, so we became Air Farce on radio, and in year 22, we got offered. Can you believe? In year 22, we got offered this because we did television, and we were very funny actually. The guys, like, they're not actors. I was the only. John Morgan, though, was so funny. A Mike from Canmore, he's a funny man, the funniest man I've ever. The most prolific writer, but comedic, so a brilliant man. But anyway, we started television, and we were a big hit from like once we started in '93.
Yeah.
And that was in year 22 of radio. Now, our radio fans would not let us go, so we were doing down at the Glenn Gould studio, live to air. We were doing radio, and we were doing television. So we would tape our television show Friday night, and then Saturday morning we were doing live radio. And the two are very different.
Yes.
You know, people go, well, what's the difference between radio and television? Like, duh.
Yeah.
I'm much taller and younger, and I have long blonde. I have a body like Angelina Jolie on radio, you know, or Pamela Anderson or something. But you know, here on television, we were playing all these characters with the wig, you know, and the makeup and the him, and the Queen. You know, hello, it's a pleasure to be here. At my age, it's a pleasure to be anywhere, but Camilla is not. And 60 years on the throne is a long time. Yes, almost as long as Charles has known Camilla, you know. But,
we have run short of time, so you've got to wrap this up.
So television was just quite fascinating. Plus, not to mention the money was better, even though it was like CBC in Canada. Yes. But, you know, with radio, we're like, well, see you next year. We finally said, can we have some kind of a contract? Because every year, year after year, they go, well, see you next year. And then John Morgan said, you know, I've got a family to feed. Can we get a contract? But in television, you know, we had a contract, a 5-year contract, and you know, John Morgan didn't really enjoy television because it cut into his playtime. But no, he found television just you know, too much hurry up and wait. But I found it both. I mean, I love radio, but television is very interesting because you get to dress up like, you know, all those great people. You mean like Hannah Gartner, you know, and of course Margaret Atwood. You know, so exciting to beat the crap out of the, you know, Robert Ford.
You know, stop doing that because I've interviewed her so many times and I don't.
And I'm pretty good, am I
not?
So. Yes, I know. She calls me Mini Me because she was on our show, right? And she signed my book to her, like, to Mini Me, which is Margaret. You know, she's adorable. And I have had like I consider myself to be the luckiest Ukrainian Canadian comedian in Canada, and I can't believe the doors that have opened to me. You know, I did film, you do voiceover. Because Canada, you're not slotted to be, you know, one thing. And just doing this play, which is a very serious play, you know, people sort of expecting stand-up. Well, they laughed, but they also cried. Yeah. And that's just me, simply me, just simply Luba. I really appreciate, you're wonderful, actually.
Thank you.
And you see the way I bounce around, that's the way my play was, you know. It was like, what do you mean? Oh, my.
This is great of you to give us all this time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you, swell indeed.